We're on the pawn on the right side. 34A2 on the right side, Amar Rav Chisda, right? Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says the following idea. We've been learning about Aravot, the willows, which willows are kosher, which willows are not kosher. And Rava says the following thing. Rav Chisda says, Hani Tlat Mile, these following three things, Ushtani Shemayu, if you want to put on the chat with that one, thank you. Ishtani Shemayu Mechichara Beit HaMikdash. When the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, the name of these items changed. Sometimes, yes, something is known as a certain name, and with time, something changes. Here specifically, as a result of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the name was changed. And the reason why the name was changed, the Mabit writes, is because of Agmas Nefesh, because of, it wasn't by chance that the name changed, but the illustration of a certain pain, of a certain pain that the Jewish people felt that they don't have the Beit HaMikdash anymore, and therefore, to remember that the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, they changed names of certain things. So we should remember the glory of the past and look forward in the future to the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Like we do certain things, the Zecha HaMikdash, we're going to do certain things to remember what they did in the Mikdash, like the taking of the lulav and the etrog for 7 days. The Torah only obligates us to take every person outside the Mikdash to take the lulav esrog for 1 day. But in Beit HaMikdash, they would take it, by the Beit HaMikdash area, they would take it for all 7 days. So to remember what they did, in the Beit HaMikdash, the rabbis tell us that we take a lulav for 7 days. So we do certain things at Zecha HaMikdash. So this is one of the things that they did, was that they changed the name, Adam, right? They changed the name of these items, and that will remind us of what happened in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. So what's unique about these three items and remembering the Beit HaMikdash? One of the three things was the chilfata. The chilfata was the safsefa. The safsefa, we said, was the arava that's not kosher. We said yesterday, because it's round, it doesn't have the qualities. We said there are like 3 qualities. We need at least 2 out of the 3 for that. We need at least that the leaves should be narrow and long, and then we spoke about the stem being red, and also we spoke about that there shouldn't be any ridges. But we said even if there's small ridges, we said that it would be kosher. But this safsefa doesn't have these qualities. Safsefa, its stem is white, leaves are round, and it also has this. It has also these edges, but it's a little serrated. So the chilfata, which was the safsefa, they now called it an arava. And an arava, what was once called an arava, now they call it a what? A chilfata. They call it a chilfata. They call it a safsefa. So today, if you would go, so now it says it's brought down by one of the commentaries. Mabit says that later on in time, everything came back to the original name. By the time that the Mishnah, the Gemara, and the way people talk today, they talk about it the way it was the original. So you had a time period, you had the original name, then it went away from the original name and it came back. Now it's back at the original name. I presume that within the early years of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, that's when they changed the name, to remember, to show that things aren't the way it was. We used to have arava. So now, like we used to take the arava in the Beit HaMikdash. They used to have for 7 days. There used to be a mitzvah in the Beit HaMikdash. Every day they would bring aravot to the Beit HaMikdash. They would go ahead and go around, circle the mizbeach, circle the altar. They would place the aravot in the altar. They waved the aravot, and now we don't have that. We don't have the Beit HaMikdash. So but how did they remember that? So instead of calling it arava, we call it arava, we call it a chilfata, something else, a different name, indicating that we don't have that arava anymore. We're changing with something, things have changed. It's not normal anymore. So therefore, to indicate that we changed the name. Is it clear? We changed the name of the arava. We called it a chilfata. And the chilfata we called an arava. So see, this was a kosher arava, let's say, once upon a time. And after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, they didn't call it anymore an arava, they called it a safsafa. They called this they gave it a different name, which represents a different type of so every time you would buy an arava and they would call it a safsafa, if you want to buy a arava now, you at that time, after the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, you would have to ask, I want a safsafa.
Use different language.
You do different language. Why usually different language? Because we don't have the arava anymore. So therefore, I'm not going to call this arava. I'm not going to. It doesn't have the name. We're not keeping the name arava anymore because arava was always used and connected with the mitzvah of we had. Now we don't have the mitzvah anymore. So the symbolic of that, we lost its mitzvah. It lost its name.
They were still in the land of Israel.
They were still in the land of Livla, if they exiled into another land. Let's say wherever they were at the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, because there was a lot of people who were thrown out of Israel. They no longer called this an arava.
They definitely had that same
Species. They had a say, but now I'm not going to call it arava anymore because it's not the arava of old. It's because we don't use it for the Beit HaMikdash. When I call it safsafa, as if safsafa is something that was not used for the arava, indicating we don't have the use anymore. If you remember to get the Beit HaMikdash back, there was a time period they would call this no longer arava, called a safsafa, which is totally different. It's not an arava. It's not a kosher arava. But then subsequently they eventually went back to the old name arava. So that was the. Now the Gemara says that there's a very big nafkamina. My nafkamina. Why is Rav Chisda telling us this important point? What was it? What was the point of Chisda telling us? You know what? This once upon a time was once called an arava, and then the name changed. But I need to know my nafkamina lalulav. It's important that people should know. They call this. Don't use if you go to a store and you ask for an arava. At that time, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, if you asked for arava, that wasn't a kosher. What they gave you wasn't a kosher arava. They gave you a safsafa, and when you ask for a safsafa, I'm buying a safsafa, when you go ahead and the lulav, you go ahead and safsafa would be kosher for the lulav, but the safsafa, what people called a safsafa, was really a kosher arava. So you need to know. This change for that time period was important to know that the name changed. So you know that when you're going ahead and buying an arava for the lulav and you want to buy an arava, you don't ask for an arava. What do you ask for? A safsafa, because that became the kosher arava. They called it a safsafa. You have to make sure you ask for a safsafa.
Like a term that just meant kosher version.
So the term that now which referred to this type of willow, you would have to ask for a safsafa. If you want to buy a willow, you want to buy a kosher arava that during that time period after they start to reach the big list, you have to make sure you're asking for a safsafa, which was not kosher willow once upon a time, but now they refer to the kosher willow as a safsafa.
Like some other species.
Right, it used to mean the safsafa used to refer to a different species.
Okay.
And now the safsafa now refers to the kosher species.
But we don't even know what that's anything from.
Say it again?
That could have been just any species from the land.
No, safsafa was a specific type of species that was, the leaves were round and weren't narrow, and the stem was white.
Oh, we brought that over because it worked also for.
Oh, so we said yesterday that safsafa was not kosher for lulav. But now what happened was they don't refer to the safsafa anymore as that species. They don't call it a safsafa anymore. That not kosher species, they call an arava.
That's the rounder one.
So the Sapsafo, right? The Sapsafo was the rounder one. Now they call it a Rava. Now, for many years, if you say I want to buy a Ravot, you would get this. You get this one. Now you go into the store, you ask for a Rava, they'll give you the not kosher one. So you got to be careful, and you got to know that if you want to kosher for the lulav, you have to now ask for the Sapsafa, which is really the species that's not a kosher species, but no longer they're going to give you a not kosher species for Sapsafa. They renamed the kosher arava. They now call it a sapsafa. Is that clear?
Yeah.
So it's like Pepsi and Coke. What was once Coke, now they're calling Pepsi. What was once Pepsi, now they're calling Coke. It's like so. If you want a Coke today, you would have to ask for a Pepsi because the Pepsi is the Coke of old.
If we had some huge tragedy go on involving Coca-Cola, I would understand why people would say, you know what, let's just call it Pepsi.
Let's just call it Pepsi.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Right. So that's why I said the huge tragedy happens, and now we're exactly that's what we're doing. We're no longer calling this Arava, we're calling it a Sapsafa. Now, also would be a nafkamina if you would go to a store, and I made up with you, I want to buy, and I'm paying for an Arava, so an Arava no longer is a Sapsafa. Now today, when you would order an Arava, when you order the Coke, you really got a Pepsi, so you really are buying a Pepsi. Therefore, the seller would have to really give you, when you ask for a Rava, he would have to give you the Safsafat species. When you ask for Safsafat, he has to give you the Rava species, because that's the way people refer to it. So therefore, when you make a sale, you have to sell it. The item that I made up to sell and to buy is the item the way people refer to the item. So if today people call a Coke a Pepsi, and I made up to buy a Pepsi, so Pepsi means Coke today, so then you got to give me a Coke. Because that's the way, that's how we refer to Coke today. We call it a Pepsi. Therefore, you have to give, if we call Coke Pepsi, and I ask for a Pepsi, you got to give me Coke. All right? Good morning, Ariel. Great to see you. The Gemara continues. We are on 34a2. What happened was Ariel when you said Birkat Torah. You said Birkat Torah, Shek Yishem Mitzvot V'Tzevona Al Divrei Torah. Remember we sometimes remind each other. Yeah. Okay. So the Gemara says, no pleasure. So the Gemara says that when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, names of certain things were changed. In a certain sense, the world is upside down. Things have changed, and they changed the name of certain items as a result of showing a feel of pain that we don't have the Beit HaMikdash. To remember that we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, they did certain things. So they changed the name of certain things. So what was one of the things? Ishipura, the horn of a ram, which is bent. Ram's horn is bent, which is symbolic. We have to bend our hearts. Lavinu Shabashamayim. We have to turn our hearts to Hashem. So what was once called a horn of a ram, which is called a shipura, now they changed the name. They called it a chasotra. A chasotra is like a trumpet. It's more of a straight type of horn, and it's not from a ram. What is it? What a Morris. Welcome back. Bachassos called shofar, right? So the different type of instruments. So the instrument that we use for Rosh Hashanah is called a shofar. An instrument that's not kosher for Rosh Hashanah, let's say it's called a chasotra. And now what happened was they changed the people. If you want to go ahead and say, if you want a shofar, you have to ask for a chatzot satra to get a shofar. And if you want a chatzot satra, if you want a trumpet, you have to ask for a shofar. Because today, what happened was they started referring to it, meaning when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, they changed the names of certain items. Instead of being known by its true name, they changed it, opposite. Or they called it something else. Symbolic of, it's not the same anymore. we don't have the shofar anymore that was used, in the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash has a halacha that says that if Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbat, right? In the Beit HaMikdash, they will blow the shofar. Outside the Beit HaMikdash in America, let's say this year, Rosh Hashanah came out on what? Shabbat. Am I correct, everybody? The first day of Rosh Hashanah came out on Shabbat. Did we blow the shofar on Shabbat of Rosh Hashanah? No. Why do we blow the shofar? Because we're afraid that people are going to come to carry the shofar, right? Maybe this person has an issue with the shofar. He's going to ask an expert. He might come to forget to carry in a public place, right? But they didn't make that gzeirah. They didn't make that injunction decree by the Beit HaMikdash. By the Beit HaMikdash, if Rosh Hashanah, if we would have the Beit HaMikdash today, this past year, if you'll be at the Beit HaMikdash, you'd be able to blow. They would blow the shofar. They blew the shofar at the Beit HaMikdash. So now, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, there's a great feeling. Look what we're missing. We're missing the shofar. So to remember that things aren't the same, that we lost something, so they took away the name of shofar. They don't call it a shofar anymore. You know what they call the shofar? A chatzatotra. It's like a tongue twister. And you know what they call the chatzatotra, which is a more straight shofar, not a kosher shofar. They call, and not from a ram. You know what they call it? A shofar. So now you need to know. It's very important to know what things are referred to. That once upon a time, let's say this was referred to as a shofar. Let's say this was a nice shofar, but no longer. If you want to buy a kosher shofar, you have to go into the store and say, "I want a chatzatotra." And if you want to, and that's what the Gemara says. L'may nafkamina, and what's gonna learn out from this halacha? The shofar for Rosh Hashanah. A shofar for Rosh Hashanah. When you go want to buy a shofar for Rosh Hashanah, don't ask for a shofar anymore. You hear that, Morris? Because they no longer, at that time, after Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, they were not calling a shofar a shofar. If you would ask for a shofar, you go into the store and say, "I want to buy a shofar." You know what they would give you? They would give you the straight horn, not a horn that's bent, not a horn from a ram. So therefore, you need to be on top of your game and say, "I want a chatzatotra." That's what you got to ask for, and they'll give you a what? A shofar. Fascinating. That's what happened at that time. Subsequently, things went back to the old, and what used to be called a shofar was called a shofar again. So today, you go into a store, you want to buy a shofar, they'll give you they'll offer you something what we call a shofar, which is kosher, ben, and the ideal shofar to use is for ram to remember the Akedat Yitzchak. So that's what you need to know. Pusarta, a table. There was a small table. You want to go buy a table, you would call it. It used to be called a peturta, and now the name was changed. It's no longer called peturta. It's called a patura. It's called a patura. And the large table that used to be called a patura is now called a what? Peturta. A little small change in the name. Now, why did they change the name of the table? Because they wanted to remember, they used to have that beautiful golden table, the Shulchan HaZahav that had the Lechem HaPanim, that table that we had the 12 breads on, 12 bread Lechem HaPanim on the table. Some people like to have 12 chalot on Shabbat, right? Some people make 12 little chalot on Shabbat to remember the Lechem HaPanim, the 12 bread that were on the Shulchan. And we don't have that anymore. Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. We don't have that table, that holy table. And to remember that, the people said, we're not going to call the table, we're not going to give the table the regular name anymore. Because things have changed. We don't have the normal type of table. We don't have that holy table anymore. So to remember that, they would change the name of a large table. They would refer to the large table the way you would refer to a small table. And when you want to buy a small table, they wouldn't call it the small table's name. They change it to the name of the large table's name. Just to remember, things aren't the same anymore. Things aren't normal. Things have been changed. People shouldn't forget when they're in exile that things aren't what we're missing. To remember that. Is that fascinating, Ariel? They changed the name of those items. And the Gemara says, "Enafkamina." And what do we need to know about that fact that they changed the name? Okay, it's nice to know that they remembered the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, but there's more than that. There's a halachic ramification, the great difference, practical difference, not just understanding philosophically to feel the pain, to feel the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, but there was something else to teach us. What was that? Regarding business deal. If I go into a store and I paid you money, and I went ahead and I paid you money I asked for a pesurta, let's say what was used to be known as the word, let's say the word pesurta is the small table. I say to you, I want to buy a pesurta, right? And you went ahead and we made up a deal, and we made a deal of what we're going to buy a pesurta. And then I went ahead and I take the pesurta, and I take home the pesurta. It was in a box, let's say, or whatever it was covered up. I took it, and then it came out that the pesurta was what was I made up a small table, and so to speak, you took from the store. You said you're buying a pesurta. You said you're buying a pesurta, which was once a small table, and then you actually took from the store a large table. So usually, if you go ahead and if you're buying a small table and you pick up a large table, you pay for a small table. But today, when you refer to a large table, you use the language of pesurta. The language that used to refer to a small table now refers to a what? A large table. So therefore, if you picked up a large table, you picked up from the store, then that is yours. Because the pesurta name, which used to refer to a small table, really today refers to the what? To the large table. So if I make up with you, I say, I made up to buy a pesurta, which used to be referred to as a small table, and we made up a price of $100. That's really now referred to as a large table, and we made a deal on a large table, and vice versa. If I use the word petura, which used to be referred to as a large table, and you gave me a small table, and then that's right, because today a petura, sorry, if you use the word petura, petura today refers to a small table. It once referred to a what? To a large table. But now, if I made up with you, I want a petura, it's no longer referred to a large table. The petura now refers to a what? A small table. So therefore, it's important to know how people refer to things. No longer is it known as that word is no longer known in its original sense. It's changed how the word. So therefore, now you'll know what you refer to. What was the deal? We made a deal on a petura, so it's no longer the large table. A petura has changed. Its name has changed. Is it clear? Morris, is it clear? Name has changed. It's now referred to as what? That the petura means a small table. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Afani Omer. There's another. He adds to this list. What is he? He adds to the list a certain limb that's at the end of the stomach of the animal. There's something called the beit kosi. The beit kosi. If you look in the art scroll on the right side, 3482, there was on the bottom. It's different parts of the stomach of the animal. The kosher animals has 4 stomachs. The food goes in, swallowed whole without chewing. It first goes into the first stomach, which is the keres, where the food begins to decay. And then it goes into the beit hakosot. And the beit hakosot is an area where a kos is like a cup. Its interior resembles many cups. And the food becomes softened in that area. And then eventually it goes back to the mouth. The food goes back to the mouth where it's chewed. And then they go into a third stomach, which is called the hemses. Now, so for our purposes, and then so what happens? So the beta kosot, and the way some of these stomachs have a very strong lining by the walls of the stomach, and some don't. And so that's what the Gemara is going to say, that what was used to be referred to as the beta kosot, now look at the language of the Gemara. Afani Omer, Beit Kosi Huvlila. What used to be called the Beit Kosi is now called the Huvlila stomach, and what used to be called the Huvlila is the Beit Kosi. It's now referred to as the Beit Kosi. So now what's the importance of knowing that? So the Gemara says, Lamay nafkamina, lamachad hanimsa bu'uve beta kosot. If you have a machat, if you have a needle that's found by the beta kosot. So usually, so Rashi explains what's the issue. The issue is that a needle, if an animal has a needle going through certain areas, if the needle goes through, it will puncture the animal in a way that the animal will die as a result of the hole. And if the animal will die as a result of the hole, but the animal didn't die, you slaughtered the animal. But there's something called a treifa. Treifa is an animal that will die as a result of what? Of an inside. One of the things, it has something wrong with the animal, some defect in the animal. There's a hole in the lung of the animal. It will die. Then that animal is not kosher, even though you slaughtered it, right? It's called a what? A treifa. An animal is going to die within the year as a result of some internal defect. It's a treifa. Even though you slaughtered it, it's not kosher. So if the needle went to one of these areas, one of these stomachs, if you have the needle, so we would say, so it depends which one, where the needle is. So if it's the machat, if the needle is found by the beta kosot, so it says like this. That so one of them has a very thick lining, like a double, like it's lined very well. And if you find a needle on one side of the beta kosot, if the hole didn't go through and through, it's on one side, the animal is kosher. Why? Because the thickness of the wall would close up the hole, that the hole did not go through. And therefore the animal will be able to live, because the hole, let's say this is make believe, if you take a look over here, make believe this is the thickness of that stomach, and the needle's on this side, but the needle did not go through. So we say that since it's thick, it's gonna live. It's not gonna take away the life of the animal. But if the needle is found on both sides, that means the needle went through, then we say the animal is going to die, because it can't live in that state. So if the needle is found on one side of the wall of the beta kosot, that's not a treifa, because that beta kosot is a type of the stomach area of the animal that is thick. And that was called, they used to be called the Beit Kosi, but now they changed the name. It's no longer referred to as Beta Kosi, it's referred to as the Huvlila, which was a different area of the animal. But now they changed the name. But if a needle is found in the thing that's today they don't want to call it the Beta Kosi. They call this thick. They call this now Havlila. Now, if the needle is found today in something that they call the Bekosi, the Bekosi today is no longer has this thick wall. The Bekosi today refers to something that has a very thin wall. So if there's a hole on one side of this thin wall, it doesn't have the strength, it's not protected by the thickness of the wall, and that animal's going to die. So therefore, you need to know what's called the Beit Kosi, what used to be referred to as the Beit Kosi, which was if you have a needle on one side, it would be kosher. No longer it's called Beit Kosi. It's called what? Hovlila. And Hovlila. So therefore now, if I say a needle was found by the Hovlila, since the Havdilah today it refers to the Beit Kosi, which has the thick wall, it's kosher if it's only on one side. But if they say a needle was found in the Beit Kosi today, which the Beit Kosi now refers to that thing which is the Havdilah, which is the thin one, so therefore it's not kosher because the Havdilah, because the Beit Kosi today they refer to the Beit Kosi as the Havdilah, as the thin wall, and therefore the thin stomach, which has a thin wall, and therefore it would be a treifa. Is that clear, everybody, a little bit? Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Bar Yosef, Afani Omer. By the way, I think the Sefer Chinuch says, why is it that the Torah says that we can't eat an animal that has a defect, has a hole in its lung, so that it's going to die within the year, but it was living, and you slaughtered it? So what the Torah says you can't eat it. And the Torah says, you know what you should do? The Torah gives you an idea, throw it to the dogs. You can benefit from it, you can't eat it. The Torah says throw it to the dogs. You could sell it, you can remember that the dogs didn't bark when we left Egypt. So we give them a reward. You give that's one of the things you could do for them. Show you appreciate. And you go ahead and you give them the treifa that you can't eat, or you sell it to the guy. Why the Sefer Chinuch is interesting? He suggests, every mitzvah has a reason. Torah doesn't always tell it. Most of the time, the Torah doesn't tell us a reason for something, right? Why is it that the Torah? Why does the Torah say you can't eat this treifa, this animal? It was slaughtered. It didn't die by itself. An animal that dies on its own without slaughtering, it didn't have shchita. But here you slaughtered the animal. So why is it that you can't go ahead and eat it? So he suggests that if the animal is going to die because of this defect, food of an animal that has a defect. Yes.
Plain simple. It's like
right. That's what he suggests. There could be a million and one reasons why. The Torah tells us we whether it's because of the health benefit or not health benefit, we do it we keep it. But it's sometimes to try to understand perhaps why does the Torah give us certain, like the Torah gave a reason why the Torah says don't make the king very wealthy. The Torah says you're not allowed to give the Jewish king a lot of money. You can't make a Jewish king very wealthy. You can't. Why not? So the Gemara, because the Gemara says, the Torah says, because maybe he's going to become arrogant. So the Torah there gives us a reason why don't make the king, or the king is not allowed to have too many wives. Maybe they're going to turn his heart. There's certain things the Torah gave reasons for, but most of the time the Torah doesn't say reasons. And one of the reasons why the Torah doesn't give a reason, but sometimes if I give you a reason, then you say, you know what, that doesn't apply to me. And if you say it does apply to me, and then you'll see, no, it doesn't apply to you. So a lot of times, if it's something that's better, you don't tell the reason, because then sometimes they think they're above it. They might mean well, but they might be mistaken. Have a great day, everybody. We're happy that everybody's here. Look forward to tomorrow.